When you turn a homestead into a business, it becomes a farmstead. That's what homesteader turned farmsteader Jesse Thiessen of Old Orchard Homestead in South Lyon, Michigan has done. In this video, I visited Jesse at his homestead, his farmstead, and today we're going to be talking turkeys, what that lifestyle is really like, why he went from homestead to farmstead, what some of the constraints are around raising poultry on a small scale. There's a lot in this one. Here it is, Jesse Thiessen of Old Orchard Homestead. One core theme that I think you're going to hear running through this video today is managing homesteading within the greater context of life. Now, what Jesse's doing here is a lifestyle. It's not just a hobby, but it's not everything because he's working off farm and with a full-time job, and he also has the chores which need to be tended to here, the animals which need to be tended to here. He has a family, he has kids, so it's all got to blend together, it's all got to come together. And he's been really smart about how he set everything up, both in terms of how many batches of broilers he does a year, when he does those, what type of equipment he has to manage them. He's tried to have different things like roll-out nesting boxes and electric hot wire to protect from predators. Those things save you the effort and energy of having to do that. When you only have a few hours a day, if that, to spend out here, you got to try and create the systems and the infrastructure to make what you're doing work in that time frame. If you don't have the right stuff, if you don't have the right systems in place, and what you're doing becomes a struggle, suddenly this homesteading lifestyle which you dreamed about becomes a nightmare because nothing's fun, nothing's working. So you're going to see a lot of cool things in this video, from infrastructure that Jesse's built, the systems he has in place to make sure that what he does works, and that romanticized lifestyle can be romanticized as much as possible within the context of reality. Even though it's not always fun, it can be hard, it can be difficult at times. Let's not play the game that it's all beautiful. There's going to be a lot of trade-offs involved. We'll hear about some of those coming up. What would you consider what you have here? You live here. Is it a homestead? Is it a farmstead? Is it a farm? What do you have and what are you trying to do?
So I would consider this a homestead. Our original goal was to produce nutritious food for our family. We were really concerned about all the GMOs and processed foods. So we started there, and as we had some surplus, we would give it to friends and family who would then say, "This is fantastic, can you grow some for me?" So it's kind of blossomed from there. We've incorporated last year to make things official, and we're now moving into the farmstead realm. The ultimate goal is the side hustle, make enough money to pay for this, pay for our food, and then have a little bit extra money.
To get into this, what was the initial draw for you? Is it a fun thing? Is it a quality of food thing? Is it, you're fed up with some sort of industrial system? What was the big, this is why I want to do this? Because you didn't always live here, you moved here to do this.
So I think it's a combination of all the above. We definitely are concerned with just having young children. We're concerned with the processed food, the GMOs, and what that's doing to their health long term. It's very enjoyable to me. There's something very almost spiritual about raising your own food, putting your hands in the soil. And then I come from a family of farmers. My mom grew up on a dairy farm. My uncles still farm commercially. So I've always been drawn to farming, really enjoy it, and wanted to do that.
Of the animals you have here, you have broilers, you have turkeys, you have layers. What's your favorite one?
Turkeys are probably surprisingly my favorite. They're very personable when you come out. They run to the fence to greet you. They'll follow you around like a dog. So that's been interesting. I like the laying hens mainly because my son, he loves them. He's like the little chicken whisperer. He comes out and helps me every day with chores, doing them, and then the chickens are small enough where he's not intimidated. The turkeys are about his height, so they intimidate him a bit. You're doing this all on the side. You work a full-time job outside the home, managing these three operations, broilers, layers, turkeys. How has that been, doing that on a nights and weekends basis? There's certainly challenges. I'm trying to put in place systems to make it as automated as possible. I just recently built the Eggmobile. The layers have been in there for probably about 7 months now. There's an automatic door, so I don't have to get up in the morning to let them out and let them in at night. Basically, all I have to do every day is gather the eggs up, make sure the water's clean and that they have food. Turkeys are pretty much same thing, self-sufficient, make sure they've got food and it's got an automatic water. The broilers are the most labor intensive, but even that, moving them once a day, making sure they have feed and water, maybe 15-20 minutes. So in all, I may be spending an hour a day, and it's quite therapeutic for me. After a long day in the office, I come home, I get outside, I get to breathe fresh air, work with the animals. So to me, it's not really a chore, it's enjoyable.
How have you refined this over time to make it simpler or easier or better, given that you have, an hour a day and you don't want to spend 5 hours a day? Even though it is therapeutic, it is fun, but it can't dominate all your time.
Sure. I think the biggest improvement has been the egg mobile. Getting that so that I'm moving the hens to fresh grass once a week. They're not getting dirty and playing in the mud. The eggs are cleaner then, so when I'm packaging and cleaning eggs, they're not as dirty. It's got the automatic door on it, so that is a huge labor save there. So before everything, every morning I had to go up, open the door out to let them out, things like that. Having electric netting to protect them from predators has been a huge plus. I did have some predator issues initially, learned the hard way about how ingenious certain predators can be. So yeah, I'm still learning, your podcast and just reading other people, what's going on out there. There's so many ideas, so many unique solutions to make things better. I think a lot of people are trying to do this and are in the same boat, so it's really helped seeing what everyone else is doing.
Behind you here, you have your turkey operation. This year you've raised 6 turkeys. You started with 7.
Yep.
How has it been raising turkeys, say, to broilers, which we'll talk about in a little bit?
The turkeys have been a lot easier. Obviously, they're bigger than the broilers, so there's a little less predator pressure. I actually thought about at one point putting them in a coop, like the chicken tractors I have, and moving them around every day, but I started looking at their size versus how much area they'd have, and it just seemed like they wouldn't be very comfortable in there. So they've been pretty easy to take care of. I've got, I don't know how much square footage is here, but they move around freely. I did have one get taken by a hawk, but otherwise we haven't had any predator pressure on them at all. They seem to be enjoying being outside in the fresh air, so I'm pretty happy with the setup we've got right now. The one thing I would like to do is maybe next year I got to figure out a way to move them a little bit more. I've been kind of moving the fencing around to try to give them some fresh grass, and then I bring in grass clippings from the mower to give them for some fresh grass. But that's the one thing that I would like to try to figure out how to make a little bit better.
One thing that's interesting about yours is you mentioned they're not inside of a tractor. They're free range within this cell that you've set up. So day and night they're in here. They roost on the little sun shelter that you have for them at night, but you're not locking them up, and it's all working out okay.
Yeah. I was very concerned with raccoons or something getting them, because when I put them out, they were smaller than a chicken. I mean, they were little guys, so I was really concerned at that point. But the Premier One fencing has kept everything at bay, so we haven't had any predator issues or anyone get in there.
On a homesteading level, I've heard a lot of people say turkeys are dumb, they're fragile in terms of health, they're not the smartest animals. What has been your experience with them?
They're probably not the brightest animals I've ever seen. The one thing it kind of worried me, especially when they were little, is it would rain, and instead of going inside their shelter, they would form a little circle and just all huddle up. So I assume that's some of their natural instincts to do. But they were fine. It didn't have any adverse effects on them. I actually brooded them with my chickens. A lot of people say that there's issues with the blackhead. I haven't had problems with that. And then the chickens would basically teach the turkeys. They'd show them where the water is, show them where the feed is. So that worked out really well. They're very friendly. They'll follow you around. So they're kind of interesting from that perspective. But we didn't lose any in the brooder. We have only lost the one through the hawk. So as far as fragility, no issues with that. Granted, this is only the second time I've ever raised turkeys. The other time I had 2 and lost 1, so we'll see.
So you started with 7, you have 6 now, 1 was for you. How did you arrive at this number? Do you have a lot of demand? Could you do more? Would you want to do more?
I think we could do more. The reason we arrived at the 6 was basically we're going to do 1 for each of my parents for Thanksgiving, the in-laws for Thanksgiving. My brother-in-law wanted 1, and then we were just going to have a couple. And I was assuming that if we raised 6, we'd lose a couple, because I had heard that so many people say they're just so fragile. So I was only expecting to maybe get 3 to 4 to actual butcher weight. 6 have survived. I was talking to people, they've said, oh, do you still have any available? And they've since, said that they want them. But I think we could do more. They're definitely more, just because they take so long to grow, there's a little more logistical issues with when you get them and family vacations in the summer, and trying to, especially around here, the processors get very busy around fall time frames, so you got to work everything out so it lines up. So there's a little bit of difficulty there logistically. That's probably my only bigger concern with raising turkeys right now.
But if you had more, you're pretty confident you could sell them?
I bet we could easily sell 3 to 4 times what we've raising right now.
At what price do you think you could sell them at?
Right now, I'm doing $6 a pound, and I haven't had any pushback whatsoever on that. It'll be interesting to see what they butcher out at. I raised one a couple years ago, and it was like a 42-pound bird, which is way too big. So I'm aiming for more like 18 to 20 pounds. So I'm very curious to see what they end up processing at.
So $6 a pound for the turkeys. Where do you price your broilers at per pound?
Broilers are at $5 for the whole bird. And then our processor charges an extra cost to part it out. So we just pass along basically whatever the processor charges us to quarter it or have it. We just pass that along to the customer.
Jesse, one thing that comes into play a lot when you're raising animals on a commercial sense or a homestead is the context of what you're trying to achieve. When you approach feed, what type of feed do you use? Why do you use it?
My main goal is from all this was to not eat GMOs. So we make sure that all the feed is non-GMO. Getting organic certified is difficult, and if we can, it's quite pricey. So I haven't been as concerned with making sure that it's organic certified, but I do want the non-GMO. So we're not 100% perfect in what my goals are, but I'm trying to be as true to what I believe as I can as far as feed goes.
And from a business standpoint, because you are selling the turkeys, or you could sell the turkeys, you are selling the broilers, how does non-GMO feed play into the economics? $5 a pound for your broilers. Of that, how much do you think you're taking home in profit?
I mean, we've got the numbers worked out. I don't know exactly off the top of my head what they are, but we're definitely making a profit on the broilers. Those are actually pretty good from a profitability standpoint. The feed to go non-GMO is not significantly more because we're here in the Midwest. It's not all that much more to go non-GMO. To go true organic, it's definitely probably double the price, if not more. But I found that it's a small price delta between the non-GMO and traditional corn. And although our customers don't necessarily demand it, they have asked, do you feed traditional or non-GMO? So I think it means something to them, and they are willing to pay a little bit more for that additional price or the feed cost.
Jesse, right here we're in front of your transport crates, and recently you've made the decision to go from processing here on your homestead to taking them to a processor that's relatively close.
Yep.
Why?
The main reason was time. So the first batch of chickens this year, about 4 days before processing date came around, I threw my back out, and I literally couldn't even walk, let alone process chickens. So I had to keep the birds around for an extra week, which I ended up losing quite a few because they just were too big and lethargic, and they were dropping of heart attacks at that point. So, and then it's just, it's stressful. I get they're just a chicken, but you're still taking a life, and to process 20, 25 of them, by the end of the day, you're pretty well drained physically and mentally.
Was that you just doing 20 to 25
that
yourself?
was just me. So
That's a full day.
It's a full day. I'd get up, start at 7 in the morning, and basically by 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I was finally done. And then the next day, I just had them packed in ice. So the next day, you then got to cut them up and actually package them. So it was a lot of work. And if I was taking into account my time, there's no way, it was profitable. So I made the decision to go with the local processor. Plus, then they're USDA inspected, so I can sell them anywhere with that inspection on them.
Right. And one thing, if you're going to a processor, this always comes up is you're going to have to invest in a transport crate itself. And these aren't cheap,
No.
but the nice thing is they last forever. So going to a processor isn't just a decision you make, you're also going to have some financial inputs into this. And these crates, they say they can hold up to 10. You found 6 to 8 can work?
Yeah, I was really concerned. If I would have packed them in, I could have definitely got 10 in there, but it was a warm day. The birds are already seeming to get stressed because they're just so big and lethargic at that point. I only went with, basically, I had the extra crates, so I just made the decision we'll put in 6 to 8 of them per crate. And I did end up losing one bird. I put them in the night before. The next morning when I came out, there was one bird that had died in there, but otherwise they all survived. There wasn't great loss or anything.
So knowing 6 to 8, let's call it even 10, you could fit in here. If you're doing a batch of 50, you got to buy at least 5 crates, and they're 50, 60 bucks a piece. That's 300 bucks
Yep.
that you're going to have to put into this. You can wash them down, they'll last a long time. But one thing that definitely you got to think about if you're going to go process off farm. One thing I've thought of from talking to a lot of people who process on farm versus off is the trade-offs of you're not doing it yourself. There's some added stress. Like when you do put the birds in here, they're getting stressed. You're taking them somewhere else. How does that align with you, and how do you feel about that?
It was definitely a concern. When I'm processing them here, I can kind of calm a bird down before I do anything. I know what's being done to them to do the processing and take their life. So I was concerned. So I actually talked to the processor before I decided to go with them, and I had a couple friends who had used them. So it's a family-run business locally here. They're very concerned about ethical treatment of the animals and everything. So I think in their end it was a good decision. It aligns with my values, but there was definitely concern about that.
Yeah, it's all part of the trade-offs of doing this business, whether it's a 4-legged type or a 2-legged type. There's going to be that one bad day that comes,
Yep.
and you're either going to be the one that does it, which has its own trade-offs and consequences, or you got to take it somewhere else and really pass that burden on to somebody else, which has its own trade-offs. And I think a lot of these businesses do try their best.
Yep.
Because they have actual people working there that have to do this day in and day out. So they're trying to make the experience good for the people. And then in terms of the animals themselves, I think a lot of times that translates. And these are relatively small scale processors that people like yourself deal with. So this isn't some massive 500 birds a minute USDA slaughterhouse.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't know how many they process through a day, but it's definitely smaller scale. I mean, they're using the kill cones just like we're using here. It's almost like a scaled up version of what I was doing. And the birds were a little stressed when I load them up. I did it at night, so they're kind of in their half sleeping mode or whatever. But other than that, they weren't too concerned. I actually had them inside the vehicle to transport them, so they weren't getting all the road wind and everything on them. They just kind of went for a ride that day. They didn't seem stressed out or anything like that. So overall, I think it was a fairly good experience.
Good one. For somebody who wants to process on farm, knowing the infrastructure that you have, knowing the equipment you had to buy, what number do you think that makes sense to buy versus rent?
I guess renting, I don't know of any place around here where I could have rented, so it wasn't really an option. But I started out with just doing hand plucking and using just a pot of water for a scalder, and I did maybe 10 to 12 birds, and that was a lot. So I knew right then and there if I was going to do anything more than maybe 10 or 12, I needed at least a plucker. That's probably the key piece of infrastructure that I see that really makes a difference in how fast you can process. So once I started scaling up to doing 30 or so birds, I made the investment in a plucker.
Now, if somebody wanted to process on farm, they're doing, let's say, a batch of 20 birds at a time, what would you advise them to think about before they made that decision? If they had also a convenient option and a quality option off farm that they could take them to?
I mean, I think first and foremost they have to think of, can they actually take the life of the animals? I know it's just a chicken, but there's still that aspect of it, so you need to be able to do that. Beyond that, I think they just need to, it's tough work. I mean, anyone who's ever plucked a chicken and gone through it, it's a lot of work. So I think they need to be very open and upfront with themselves and make sure that you're in for like a 10-hour day of literally gutting, being in it up to your arms. It's not an easy task. So
it's going to take a lot longer than you think.
It could take a lot longer than you think. I mean, if you can sucker some friends into helping out and giving them some free chicken, it'll definitely help the process out. That was one of my bigger issues, is it was just myself. So I would, do the killing, do the scolding, do the plucking, and keep moving on. And I couldn't find a good way to be real efficient and keep things, because you've always got some sort of bottleneck somewhere. You can only do so much at a time. So it was a long day.
Jesse, this is a homestead, and one thing that you find around homesteading is it can be romanticized. Now, you don't do this full time.
Right.
I mean, but it's on full time. The animals are always here, and you always got something to do. How much of this is hobby? How much of this is lifestyle?
To me, I think it's more lifestyle than hobby. Farming's just in my blood. I enjoy it, and I've got a sign in the house that says farming is a lifestyle, or not a job, it's a lifestyle. And there's a lot of truth to that. That's one thing that's holding us back from getting different types of animals, because we couldn't take the vacations. I've got things set up now where we can at least go away for a weekend or something like that without too much negative for the animals. So,
do you feel like you could take a day off fairly easily without stressing or without having to do an insane amount of prep work to take that day off?
Right now, with the number of birds we have on site, yeah, there's definitely, with the automatic waters and the way the rollout nesting boxes are, we can take a day off without too much concern. You go much longer than a day or two, then yeah, you've got to do some prep work. You got to get a neighbor to come over or something like that. So it's a little bit of stress there.
One of the things I don't think people think about when they think about that romanticized lifestyle is that day in, day out, your back hurts, you got to do it. It's cold out, you got to do it. You want to take the day off or 5 days off. You can't always do that depending on when it happens.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, today it's late October, it's 70 degrees out and beautiful. It's not hard to want to come outside. Come January, when it's 0 out and I'm chipping something went wrong and the water froze up, you're chipping it out and you're freezing, it's not so much fun. So there's definitely days where I'll sit inside and be like, man, why am I doing this type of thing? But
you got to take the good with the bad.
Exactly.
There you have it, Jesse Thiessen of Old Orchard Homestead in South Lyon, Michigan. If you want to follow along with what Jesse's doing, I've linked to his website and his Facebook page below. Also, this is the first in a series of videos with Jesse. There'll be more coming. We're going to talk pastured poultry on a small scale. We're going to take a good look at his egg mobile, and we're going to talk more about that homesteading lifestyle and what it's really like to balance everything going into it. Family, the animals, and a full-time job. Because as you heard in this one, this isn't a full-time thing for Jesse. He's doing it on the side, but he's making it work on many levels, and that's what we're going to be showing throughout this series. Thanks for watching this one, everybody. Until next time, be nice, be thankful, and do the work.